The phone slipped from my hand when I heard the words, "We sold the lake cabin." My sanctuary, my safe place, gone, vanished. Because my parents decided my sister's $120,000 wedding mattered more than my entire future. What they didn't know was that this betrayal was the very spark that would set their carefully crafted lives on fire. If you've ever been betrayed by family, or underestimated to the point of being erased, then you're going to love this story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in, because you're about to hear how one daughter turned the ultimate family betrayal into the sweetest revenge imaginable. My name is Valeria, and the first time I laid eyes on the lake house, I felt something I had never felt before: peace. Imagine this, an old wooden cabin tucked between tall pine trees, the kind that swayed gently in the wind like they were humming a lullaby only I could hear. The lake itself was still and glassy, reflecting the golden sunrise in the mornings and burning pink sunsets in the evenings. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't grand. But it was mine. I worked for it. Every late-night shift at the diner during college, every penny I saved instead of spending it on vacations or flashy clothes, all went into making that dream a reality. While my friends were posting pictures of trips to Paris or brand new cars, I was pouring coffee for truckers and wiping down greasy counters, telling myself, one day, this will pay off. And it did. The day the keys to the cabin landed in my hand, I cried. Not polite tears either, the ugly, heaving kind of sobs that make your chest hurt. That house wasn't just property. It was proof that I wasn't the useless, lesser daughter my family always seemed to think I was. See, growing up, my younger sister Clara was the star. She had the bright blue eyes, the golden curls, the voice that could silence a room when she sang. If Clara wanted something, she got it. If Clara made a mistake, it was excused. And if I wanted something, I was told to wait. To sacrifice. To be understanding. "Valeria, you're the responsible one," my mom used to say, her tone sickly sweet but loaded with expectation. "Clara just needs more help right now." It was a script I knew by heart. Clara wanted piano lessons. Sure, I could give up mine. Clara needed money for a dress. Of course, I could wear last year's hand-me-down. Clara crashed her car. Well, maybe I didn't need the down payment I'd been saving. The lake house was the one thing they didn't touch. Or so I thought. I didn't visit the cabin every weekend. Work kept me busy, and honestly, part of the magic was knowing it would always be there when I needed it. I went up twice a month, sometimes to write in my journal, sometimes just to breathe in silence. It was my reset button. But then came the call. It was a Thursday evening. I had just finished a long day at work, the kind where every email feels like a personal attack and the coffee runs out before noon. My phone buzzed with my mother's name. I answered, expecting the usual chatter about family dinners or Clara's latest triumph. Instead, her voice was trembling, rehearsed, almost like she was bracing for my reaction. "Valeria," she said, "I just want you to hear it from us before you find out another way. We sold the cabin." The words didn't register at first. My brain snagged on them like a sweater caught on a nail. "We sold the cabin." I laughed nervously, thinking I misheard. "You, what?" "It was for Clara," she rushed on, as if speed could soften the blow. "You know how important this wedding is. She's finally marrying into a good family, Valeria. They're expecting something grand, and she deserves it. We needed the money." My chest tightened, a band of iron squeezing around my ribs. My mouth went dry. "What do you mean, you needed the money? That was my house. You can't just..." Her voice sharpened. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like you lived there full time. And honestly, you should be happy for your sister. She'll only have one wedding, but you can always buy another house." I nearly dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so violently that I had to grip the edge of the counter just to stay upright. Buy another house. As if cabins grew on trees. As if the years of back-breaking shifts I put in meant nothing. Then the detail that gutted me most, she whispered, "We had to sign for you, of course, but don't worry. It's done. Everything's handled." They had forged my signature. The room spun. My sanctuary, stolen. My trust, shattered. And the worst part? They didn't even sound guilty. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a storm of memories. The first night I lit the fireplace in that cabin. The day I planted wildflowers along the porch. The quiet mornings where I thought, finally, I belong somewhere. Gone. All because Clara wanted chandeliers and imported roses at her wedding. Every nerve in my body buzzed with betrayal. My heart hammered, not with sadness this time, but with rage. Not the quick, flaring kind of anger that fizzles out after a few hours. No, this was slow, heavy, and simmering. The kind of anger that sinks into your bones and whispers, "You will not let this stand." Because it wasn't just about the house. It was about every time they had chosen Clara over me. Every time I had been the afterthought. Every sacrifice I made without so much as a thank you. This was the final insult, the undeniable proof that in their eyes, I was expendable. But they had underestimated me. That night, as I lay awake, one thought kept circling like a hawk over prey. If they think they can steal from me, then it's time they learn what it feels like to lose everything. The plan wasn't clear yet. But my resolve was. They had crossed a line they could never uncross. And I wasn't about to stay the quiet, responsible daughter anymore. This was the beginning of something they would never forget. The next morning, I woke up with that same storm in my chest. My first instinct was to drive straight to my parents' house, pound on their door, and demand answers. But then another thought slipped in, quiet, calculated. No. Don't waste your rage. Use it. So instead of storming over, I called Clara. I needed to hear it from her. She answered on the second ring, her voice sugary sweet. "Valeria. You heard, didn't you? About the wedding." "About the cabin," I snapped. My voice shook, but it wasn't with weakness, it was with fury I was barely holding back. There was a pause, then a sigh like I was inconveniencing her. "Look, I know you're upset. But really, you weren't even using it that much. And this wedding is important. Valeria. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? Do you know how many eyes will be on me? This is my one chance to shine." Her words hit me like a slap. My chest burned. "Clara, that cabin was mine. I bought it with my money, my work. And you let them take it." She chuckled, dismissive. "You're being dramatic. You'll get over it. Besides, think of it this way, you're helping me start my perfect life. Isn't that what family's for?" I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped the phone. The arrogance in her voice, the entitlement, it was worse than I imagined. That weekend, I drove by the venue they had picked for her wedding. It was obscene. A sprawling estate with manicured lawns, marble fountains, and chandeliers visible through the windows even from the road. Workers were already setting up tents and fairy lights, and I could hear the faint notes of a string quartet practicing inside. All of it, funded by my sanctuary. I sat there in my car, staring at the ridiculous spectacle, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. And in that moment, I promised myself something. If they want a fairy tale, I'll give them one. But it won't end the way they think. Over the next few days, I gathered information. I dug through paperwork, called contacts, and confirmed what I suspected. The sale of the cabin had been rushed through using forged documents. My parents had signed my name on legal papers. Illegal, plain, and simple. That discovery didn't just fuel my anger, it gave me leverage. But revenge couldn't be rushed. No, it needed to be precise, patient. Like a knife sliding between ribs, slow enough to savor. I started attending family dinners again, acting normal, quiet, detached, but not confrontational. My parents seemed relieved, mistaking my silence for acceptance. Clara, meanwhile, chattered on endlessly about wedding details. Imported orchids, a custom designer gown, a cake taller than I was. "Valeria," my mother cooed one evening, "you'll be Clara's maid of honor, won't you?" I nearly choked on my water. Maid of honor. After what they'd done. But I forced a smile. Of course. Anything for family. Inside, my stomach twisted, but outwardly, I was calm. Let them believe I was still the obedient daughter. Let them think I had swallowed the betrayal. Because the sweeter my smile, the sharper my revenge would feel when it finally landed. One night, I sat alone at my desk, staring at a blank page in my journal. I wrote one word at the top: justice. Under it, I began listing everything I knew. The forged documents. The sale details. The timeline of when it happened. Every incriminating piece of evidence I could gather. And then, another list: opportunities. That's when I realized her wedding would be the perfect stage. All the people they were so desperate to impress would be there. The family friends. The in-laws. The high society guests. If the truth came out in that setting, the humiliation would be nuclear. But I needed more than just humiliation. I needed to make sure they lost everything. So I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a friend from college who had once told me, half jokingly, "If you ever need someone to bury your enemies legally, I'm your guy." I never thought I'd take him up on it. When I told him what happened, his voice dropped, cold and serious. "Valeria, they committed fraud. That's not just shady, it's criminal. You have a case." Hearing those words sent a thrill through me. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt the ground solid beneath my feet again. I wasn't powerless. I had the law on my side. We discussed strategy. Quietly, discreetly. I didn't want my family to catch even a whiff of what was coming. Meanwhile, at family gatherings, Clara's smugness grew unbearable. She pranced around in her designer outfits, flaunting her wedding plans like they were a crown. One night, she leaned close to me and whispered, "You know, Valeria, not everyone gets to be the star. Some of us are just supporting characters." She patted my arm like she was consoling me. "But don't worry. I'll make sure you look pretty in the photos." My jaw nearly cracked from holding back the words I wanted to spit in her face. But instead, I smiled sweetly and said, "Thanks, Clara. You've always been so thoughtful." She laughed, completely oblivious. But inside, something dark settled in me. They thought I was background noise, the shadow to Clara's spotlight. They had no idea I was the storm building just beyond the horizon. And when it finally hit, it wouldn't just ruin her wedding, it would shatter everything they thought they controlled. As I left that night, my mother called after me, "Don't forget your dress fitting for the wedding, Valeria." I waved, pretending to agree. But inside, I was already writing the ending to this story. They had written me off as the quiet, responsible daughter. The one who would always sacrifice, always forgive. But they were about to learn the truth. I wasn't just a supporting character. I was the author. And I was about to rewrite everything. The weeks leading up to Clara's wedding were a blur of forced smiles and hidden intentions. On the surface, I was the dutiful maid of honor, helping with fittings, listening to endless chatter about table settings, pretending to care about whether the champagne was imported or domestic. But underneath that mask, I was sharpening every weapon I had. My lawyer friend, Daniel, had already begun pulling threads. He discovered that the buyer of my cabin was a wealthy couple who had no idea they were buying stolen property. The forged signature, the rushed paperwork, everything was a legal time bomb. "Valeria," he said during one of our secret meetings, "once we file, it'll all come crashing down. Your parents could face charges. Your sister's wedding funds could get frozen. This isn't just about embarrassment, it could ruin them financially." Hearing that should have scared me. After all, they were still my family. But instead, I felt a strange calm, like watching a storm roll in and knowing you're the one who summoned it. Still, I wanted more. It wasn't enough to win quietly in court. They had stolen my sanctuary in the shadows. I wanted to drag their betrayal into the light, for everyone to see. That's when the idea came. The wedding. The perfect stage. If I revealed the truth at the right moment, their entire charade of wealth and perfection would collapse in front of every guest they had tried so hard to impress. But timing would be everything. So, I played along. At bridal fittings, Clara twirled in her gown, asking me if she looked like a princess. "Of course," I said, smiling through clenched teeth. "You look unforgettable." At the rehearsal dinner, my parents beamed at her like she was royalty. My mother leaned close to me and whispered, I'm so glad you came around, Valeria. I knew you'd support your sister. Support her. They had stolen everything from me, and yet they still believed I was there to hold Clara's crown steady. I wanted to laugh in their faces. But I stayed silent, because silence was my camouflage. Meanwhile, Daniel helped me prepare. He drafted the legal filings, gathered all the documents, and even lined up the buyer of the cabin as a potential witness. We agreed that the lawsuit would drop the week of the wedding, timed so perfectly that the fallout would land right as Clara walked down the aisle. But I wanted a more public strike too. Something no one could ignore. So I created a slideshow. Photos of me working at the diner, saving every penny. Pictures of the cabin, before and after I fixed it up. Smiling selfies on the porch. Then, the documents, the sale, the forged signature, the proof of betrayal. I titled the presentation simply, "The Price of Clara's Wedding." It was cruel. It was bold. And it was exactly what they deserved. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. My heart pounded, a mix of nerves and anticipation. I kept picturing their faces when the truth dropped, the shock, the horror, the whispers spreading through the crowd. It would be a reckoning they couldn't escape. On the morning of the wedding, Clara was radiant in her dress, glowing like she had already won some prize. She fussed with her veil, giggling, "Valeria, make sure my train looks perfect when I walk. I don't want anything to ruin my moment." Oh, Clara. You had no idea. Guests filled the estate grounds, hundreds of them. The air buzzed with music, chatter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Everything was polished, staged, designed to impress. My parents floated through the crowd, basking in the glow of their perfect daughter's perfect day. But beneath the glitter, cracks were forming. Because at precisely 3 p.m., while Clara posed for photos, Daniel filed the lawsuit. By 3:30, the county clerk's office had frozen the sale funds pending investigation, which meant the money they thought was safe, gone. Their accounts, frozen. Their financial lifeline, cut. And at 4 o'clock, the real show began. As guests settled into their seats for the ceremony, I slipped inside the reception tent. The big screen meant for the couple's slideshow, baby photos of Clara, cute stories, happy memories, was waiting. I had already swapped the USB stick with my own presentation. I stood near the back, my heart hammering as the lights dimmed. The screen flickered. The first image appeared. Me, 17 years old, in my diner uniform, holding a paycheck with pride. Then came the cabin photos, the repairs, the laughter, the sunsets. Confusion rippled through the guests. Whispers rose. And then, the sale documents. My forged signature. The proof. The title card, sold without consent, for Clara's wedding. The silence was electric, heavy, suffocating. All eyes turned toward my parents, then Clara. My sister's face went pale under her makeup. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. My father surged to his feet, shouting, "Turn it off. This isn't supposed to be shown." But it was too late. Every guest had seen it. The betrayal wasn't just whispered behind closed doors anymore. It was exposed, raw, undeniable. Clara stumbled, her veil slipping. She hissed at me across the aisle, her voice venomous. "How dare you?" I met her eyes, calm, steady. "How dare you?" Gasps echoed through the crowd. The string quartet faltered into silence. The illusion of perfection they had built so carefully crumbled in an instant. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like the one holding all the power. Chaos erupted in the wedding tent. Guests murmured loudly, some even standing, craning their necks to get a better look at the documents still flashing across the screen. The polished illusion of Clara's perfect day was unraveling thread by thread. The groom's parents looked horrified. His mother whispered something sharp into his father's ear, her lips pressed tight. The groom himself, poor Michael, turned to Clara with confusion etched across his face. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice shaking loud enough for everyone to hear. Clara's eyes darted wildly, mascara smudging as panic clawed its way up her throat. "No. It's a lie, it's all a lie. Valeria's just jealous." But her words sounded desperate, hollow. The documents didn't lie. And neither did the frozen bank account alerts now pinging my father's phone. He stared down at the screen, his face draining of color. "This can't be happening," my mother whispered, her voice brittle. "Not today, not here." I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the polished floor. For the first time, every eye in the room was on me. And instead of shrinking under their gaze, I stood taller. "It is happening," I said, my voice steady, slicing through the noise. My cabin, the one I worked years to buy, was sold illegally. My signature was forged. Also Clara could have this circus. I swept my hand toward the chandeliers, the overflowing flowers, the ridiculous luxury. And now, everyone knows the truth. The murmurs swelled into gasps and whispers. Some guests shook their heads in disgust. Others outright glared at my parents. The groom's father stood abruptly. "We will not have our son tied to fraud," he snapped. He turned to Michael. "This marriage is off." Clara screamed, clutching at his arm. "No. Daddy, please, don't do this. Michael, don't listen to them." But Michael pulled his hand away, his expression cold. "You lied to me, Clara. About everything." The ceremony collapsed in a storm of voices, guests gathering their things, photographers snapping pictures of the chaos that would no doubt spread like wildfire. My parents were frozen in place, humiliated, powerless. My mother finally broke, sobbing into her hands. My father slumped into his chair, staring at the ground like he could disappear into it. And me. I walked out of that tent with my head high, my heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and relief. For once, I wasn't the quiet daughter in the background. I was the storm that tore their empire apart. The wedding never happened. Clara's reputation was shredded. My parents faced a legal nightmare that stripped them of their savings and social standing. And me. I got my cabin back. But more than that, I got justice. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from Clara's wedding disaster spread like wildfire. The story hit local news. Bride's lavish $120,000 wedding collapses amid fraud scandal. Neighbors whispered. Old family friends distanced themselves. Even extended relatives called me privately to say, "We always knew something was off with the way your parents favored Clara." My parents tried to reach out, of course. My mother left voicemails, sobbing, begging me to understand that they did it for Clara's happiness. My father, prideful even in shame, called only once. His words were short. "You went too far, Valeria." Too far. They forged my name, stole my home, and shattered every ounce of trust one had left. I didn't go too far. I simply leveled the scales. The lawsuit played out exactly as Daniel predicted. The forged signature was undeniable. The buyer of my cabin, horrified to discover the fraud, testified willingly. In the end, the property was legally restored to me, and my parents were slapped with fines and legal costs that gutted their finances. Clara tried to save face on social media, posting teary videos about how I had ruined her life. But the comments told a different story. People weren't buying the victim act anymore. Her carefully curated image of the golden daughter crumbled. And me. I drove back to my cabin one crisp autumn morning, my hands trembling slightly as I turned the key in the lock. The door creaked open, and the smell of pine and old wood wrapped around me like an embrace. My sanctuary was mine again. I stood on the porch, staring out at the glassy lake. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the background character in my family's drama. I felt free. I thought about the girl who had scrubbed dishes and poured coffee to save enough money for this cabin. I thought about the sacrifices, the tears, the countless times I was told to wait, to give, to step aside. That girl deserved this victory. And I promised myself something. Never again would I let anyone, family or not, decide my worth. Justice wasn't just about getting the cabin back. It was about reclaiming my voice. My place. My life. So, what did I learn? That blood may be thicker than water, but it doesn't excuse betrayal. That family should be built on love, not exploitation. And that sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't just about making them pay, it's about finally standing tall and saying, "You will never control me again." If this story gave you chills, Smash that like button and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own family stole from you? Because one thing's for sure, sometimes, karma just needs a little push.